Eamon Khan here for Seconds Out. Pleasure to be joined by Matchroom Boxing CEO Frank Smith. Frank, we'll jump straight into the news. The biggest topic on the headlines is that Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn are locked in. It's now been announced that the deal has been agreed for the rematch heading into later on in the year. Just talk me through that process of getting the fight over the line.
Yeah, look, huge fight. The first one, I mean, shocked a lot of people at how good it was. A lot of people now, I don't think would have realised or expected what we saw that night in April between those two guys. A spectacular fight. Glad it's back on. It was always a two-fight deal. I was always very confident that the second fight would happen. I think we saw the issue with September. I believe Eubank Jr. wasn't ready. And now we're good to go. November 15th, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. What a night it's going to be.
There was some sort of conversation, I don't know how concrete it was, that maybe the fight could be moved to a different venue. Wembley was sort of talked about. Was there ever that possibility or discussion taking place about a different location for the fight?
No, look, it was all dependent on dates. It was always, if you remember back post the first fight, His Excellency said in the ring, the rematch will happen here, back at Tottenham later in the year. Obviously, we didn't have the dates then because of the football season. September 20th and 27th was always a date we were planning for. And then ultimately, when the fight was announced, then, the following everything happened that went on that we saw and to do with Eubank and Boxer, etc. But it was always the plan for those dates. That was always something that had been spoken about between all the groups. And now we see ourselves November 15th. So, it would have always been dependent on the venue choices available at that time, but Tottenham was always the plan and focus for the fight.
It's also been said that if the fight was to happen again, it would be for the same terms of the first fight, being that Eubank Jr. be at 160 and having to rehydrate the next day, capped at 170. Is that the case as well?
Yeah, contractual terms remain the same. There's been no approaches, no discussion of any changes. They were entered into for the first fight, as were they entered into for the second fight at the same time. So, there's been no change on that. That is still the plan for this fight.
Right, that's a key point. Obviously, when it comes to talk about, and that was a topic of discussion surrounding Eubank Jr. making the weight. And from your point of view, I guess you'd say that he entered into that contract, and that's his own responsibility as well to take on those risks. But you're saying that there wasn't any discussion surrounding that for the second fight.
No, nothing about the second fight. I mean, I do, look, what I find crazy is Chris Eubank Jr. is a grown man. He's a grown adult, right? Who is getting paid an absolute fortune to do what he does, right? He's getting paid to do his job. And he accepted the terms. No one else, him. Like anything in life, we all have choices to make, don't we? So you could get offered a fortune to go and do a much harder job, and you decide whether you want to do it. He's done that, right? And this narrative that he was pushed and forced into doing this, he wasn't forced into doing anything. As we know with Christian Eubank Jr., as people have seen, he's his own man. He makes his own decisions. He said that time and time again, and he decided to accept these terms to get paid a lot of money, and I think what's also forgotten is the narrative and the rhetoric around it all was, oh, he's forced in, he's been pushed into fighting at 160. Every fight that he was talking about prior to the Conor Benn fight was at 160. Adames, Lara, Janibek, all those were, when he was talking about, I'm going to fight for a world title if I don't fight Conor Benn. They were all 160 fights, right? No one had a problem. No one said a word. He obviously posted the video of him making weight. Look, the reality is making weight does get harder as you get older. Obviously, I'm not an athlete myself, but it's quite simple to understand that. Boxing isn't known for people showing that side of the sport. How many fighters have you seen that have showed their weight cuts, right? Whereas you
I've lost you.
can't
You
like
got
that.
me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, just rewind 5 seconds.
Every fight week you see fighters cutting weight. Chris Eubank Jr. did that for a reason, from a PR perspective. But that's what he does. That is everything Chris Eubank Jr. does is from a PR perspective, to get a reaction. Is it easy for him to make 160? No, I'm sure it's not. That's the reality. Is it easy for most fighters to make weight? No. You just don't see what they go through to do it. And I'm not a coach. I'm not a trainer. I don't sit through that process. That's not my job. I'm not an expert in it. But he chose to do it. Just like he chose to sign up to every fight he's done so far. He decided to do it. He accepted the terms. And when it comes to the second day weigh-in, there was no problem with that weight. Like he was well under that weight. I think I wasn't there, but I think he wore a jacket to do the weigh-in. So that isn't really a talking point. I think the bigger talking point was always the 160. But that's been his natural weight that I haven't selected, or the person over here has selected. That's what he's been at, apart from 2 or 3 fights at 168 that he's had.
So from your point of view and being direct about this, off of the back of Chris saying, I think it was on the Diary of the CEO, about kind of what he went through after the fight, you wouldn't be concerned of any health implications for Chris, whether it be making the weight at 160 or after the fight afterwards in taking a rematch?
Look, as always in the sport, we want every fighter, safety is paramount, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, and I may get stick for saying this, I don't think Chris Eubank is the absolute athlete. I don't think he lives his life like certain athletes do. That's just my opinion. I don't think he does those extra 1% of whether it's nutrition, whether it's training. That's just my opinion. Yeah. And I'm right, I'm allowed to have that opinion. I think it's always going to be tough. And it's always been tough. It's not like he's made 160 easy throughout his career. That's the truth. But could he do things in his training, in his and in his regime to make it easier for himself? Maybe. But again, that's for the team around him to decide. I'm not party to that. I'm not around him. I'm not the one sitting in the gym with him saying, oh, his weight's 162, 163. What? That's not my job, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not involved in that in any way. So I can't sit here and have an opinion on it because I'm not there saying, I'm sure with the money he's on and the team he should have around him, he should have specialist people who say, right, this is what you need to do. This is how you're going to do it. And if it's impossible to do it, and if it's not safe to do, you shouldn't do it. But that's for his side to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like if I was representing a fighter and I said, I don't think you should do this. I don't want to be involved in this because I know that side of it. That would be my duty. And I would, and I'd be in a position to say, this is right, or we shouldn't do this because of X, Y, Z. I'm not in that position. That question has to be asked to the people who represent him. The people who represent him, need to be asked that question, not me.
Are you aware of boxers' current involvement with the fight, if at all? Obviously, we're waiting for information as to where they land in terms of their broadcasting of their fights. But are you aware of any situation in terms of boxers being involved with this fight?
I don't know. So it's always, let's be honest, it's always a bit of a shit show with them. Chris Eubank Jr. has openly said, and his team around him, Napa, etc., have said they make their own decisions. Boxers a partnership, but Chris Eubank Jr. decides what he does. So I don't know. Is my answer. I don't think they've posted about it on their social channels. I don't know. I haven't seen it. So again, a question for them. I guess they will be. But I don't know what the relationship's like.
And in terms of before the fight was made, how serious or how close was Conor Benn to pursuing different routes and different opponents?
I think we obviously have to do a job for Conor Benn. At the same time, the agreement was always in place for a second fight, and there was a time period for that to happen. This is within that time period for that fight to happen. There was obviously a view that if it doesn't happen, we need to think about other things. But it never really got that far. I think everyone was always confident that this fight would happen.
Do you anticipate further pushback from Eubank Senior?
I don't know. I don't know what the position is. I don't know. I haven't heard any more conversation of it. Of what his position is on the matter. I don't think he's done any interviews about it. If he has, I haven't seen them. So I'm not sure.
Fair enough. Changing tact a little bit, but something that also is serious issues surrounding Galal Yafai and Francisco Rodriguez. I just wonder if there's been any update in terms of movement on an apparent proposed rematch between the two of them, if that's something Matchroom would pursue as well. What is the current state of play for Galal?
Yeah, no, look, that's not the plan. Currently, I don't believe he'd be able to box in the UK anyway.
Right.
The plan for us and the focus and the push for us is to get clarify that world title shot. Straight, obviously, Sandoval won against Taraji last week in Japan. And that's the focus for us, getting that world title opportunity. And that's what we'll continue to push.
You've recently announced your slate of shows for the forthcoming period. Obviously, Crocker Donovan is headlining the slate of shows in the UK, of course, and Ireland, alongside Allen versus McMillan. Again, about the process of coming and creating those fights, and do you feel you've got the right balance in terms of offering to fight fans?
Yeah, look, I think we've been working hard, working through the shows. McCormack back out against Power in a step-up fight, on September 6th in Newcastle. You got in Mexico, you got Sugar Nunez as well, defending his world title against Diaz in a brilliant fight. September 13th, a cracker of a fight between Crocker and Donovan for the IBF full world title. Sold 15,000 tickets already at Windsor Park for that show as well. So that's going to be an unbelievable atmosphere in there. October 11th, two back-to-back, or one show announced. Dave Allen against Arslan in a brilliant fight and taking the toughest test he can take. And respect to him for doing that, because a lot of fighters, as we always say, don't want to do that, don't want to put themselves in those positions. But he knows to take it seriously. He needs to be in there with someone he's scared about in some ways. And he is at the stage of his career. If he comes through this, he sets himself up for the biggest fights because he's a huge character. Ticket sales have been unbelievable for that show as well. We're going to have a packed out Sheffield Arena, over 10,000 people in there on October 11th as well. So that's a great fight, great undercard as well. Junaid Boston against Fawaz, the rematch there. Josh Padley against Bellotti. Leo Atang as well, back out. A whole host of young stars on that card. October 17th, a brilliant fight. Kieran Conway against George Liddard. I think that's a great headliner. British and Commonwealth middleweight titles. A real fight. And, respect to both guys for taking that. Kieran, I think at times looked like he was looking at could he go the European route, but Liddard was always pushing for that fight in an early stage of his career. I think that's a brilliant fight. Going to announce the undercard there as well. So, our focus is to deliver consistent, great fights. And I think that's what we've done. People will always have opinions. I think undoubtedly we've got the best UK schedule right now. We're going to announce some bits in the US as well very soon. So I'm excited.
Yeah, let's get to some of those opinions. And I put the hardcore hat on for a moment, and you're aware that hardcore fans love to criticize as well. Let's just be straight about it. But one of the things that has come out I see online is regarding Matchroom's comments, whether it be from, I think, more so from Eddie, about not wanting to do York Hall shows, and that was for kind of small hall promoters. But Matchroom have now returned to York Hall. There seemed to be a reluctance to go back to smaller arenas, but now that's since changed. What has been that shift recently?
I mean, I actually pushed, I said we should do it at York Hall. That was the focus for me, to do it at York Hall. I think it's a great fight for York Hall. I think sometimes you can go to a venue. Could we have sold 3,500, 4,000 tickets? Yes, for that show. But you'd be half full in a bigger arena like the Copper Box with not the same atmosphere. And also, quite honestly, and people don't really understand this, if you sell another 2,000 tickets, it doesn't cover the cost of going to those bigger venues, which is crazy to think. But that's the cost of putting on events right now. So yeah, York Hall was something I pushed. So you can't blame Eddie for that one, for saying, you can't blame him for going back on his word.
So you're saying that's by your design
What, Frank Smith?
in terms of wanting to
Yeah,
go?
I think, and that fight as well, headlining, because I think it's a great fight. I think it's a brilliant fight, and it could have gone on an undercard, but we felt like it was a great fight to headline with.
What I'm trying to get at is there's also a feeling that maybe Eddie's uh, having a little bit less involvement. You're taking more of the reins, and it's a Frank Smith decision to.
No, look, he loves it. You couldn't get rid of him if you tried. He's not going anywhere. He's not trying to go anywhere. He loves boxing more than anyone you could ever meet. Um, my job is always I'm trying to obviously run a business at the same time, and I'm more of the Excel spreadsheet behind the madness. Um, and we balance each other. I've always said this. We sort of balance each other out. Sometimes I'll say things and he'll go, "You're mad," and he'll say things and I'll say, "He's mad." So he's not going anywhere. It's always been the same. It's been the same for 5 or 6 years. Yes, nothing's changing.
The other thing was talking about you mentioned that you feel like you've got the best UK schedule amongst the promoters, but there's a feeling from the hardcores that isn't as good as it could be. What would you say to those who are critical of the schedule?
I'd say ultimately the numbers don't lie. We're going to have 20,000 people in Belfast on September 13th. We're going to have 10,000 people in Sheffield on October 11th. We're working on a big show for November. Obviously, our involvement in the Conor Benwood fight again. You're never going to, I think you come to the point you're never going to please everyone. We're our own biggest critic. We're always going to be the ones pushing ourselves forward. And yeah, that for me is the key. We're doing shows that people are buying tickets to. That shows that there is interest. And I think that's a very hard thing to battle back.
What would you say about the current state of play in the UK with, as we mentioned previously, Ben Shalom searching for a deal, nothing finalized? If you look wider in the US, Top Rank have come to the end of their deal as well. The current state of play seems to be, I think, Wasserman as well too, have come to the end of their Channel 5 deal in terms of their traditional boxing output. So two promoters in the UK searching for destinations, or Wasserman do have some rights on DAZN, don't they, as well? But what do you think is the current state of play with in terms of competition and boxing?
Look, boxing's ever evolving. It's like when you look over the last 15 years since I've been involved in boxing, you see the entrance into the market, the money coming into the sport, broadcasters leaving the sport. Times change. Times evolve, focuses change and switch, leadership changes at companies, that changes mentality. I think you go back to my interviews of months ago, I said, in my opinion, Sky would never renew with Boxer. And, I was right. Not saying I'm right about everything, but I was right about that. I'm sure they will do a deal with BBC iPlayer in some way, but I could get a deal with BBC tomorrow for shows, and I haven't even got a stable of fighters myself. So I mean, you're never going to get confidence from a broadcaster when you've failed at what they said. We're at the biggest platform in sport in the country. This is a place to be. How are you ever going to put confidence into fighters or a client if you couldn't get it right there? So that doesn't surprise me. I've always been open with my opinions there. And people will say, "Oh, you're jealous, this, that, the other." No, it's just my opinion. And I seem to have got it right so far. Other areas in the market, like you say, they're Top Rank. Interesting times. They've had a huge deal for, I think $90 million a year with ESPN. Look, I think Top Rank's a tremendous business. I think they've been around for many years. They've got tremendous archive, a great team of people there as well. I'm sure they'll find something. Will it be anywhere near what they have? Probably not. But landscapes evolve and the market changes. BBC, obviously, you've got their Amazon shows, but very, infrequent in truth. And ultimately, we're all led by having strong broadcast deals, and that's what we need for the sport to continue to thrive and grow. I have to be honest, I don't think there's enough talent in British boxing for more than two main promotional entities. That's my view. And I think what you've seen over recent times with a spread of promotional entities is that fighters, there's more demand for fighters. Fighters then get great deals, which is good for the boxers, by the way, but not necessarily for the long-term growth of the sport. But they get great deals, and they get great deals for fights that don't mean anything. So then you got a fight, 3 fights here, 5 fights here, 2 fights here, whatever it is, wherever they are, and they're getting paid really well, but they're not in fights that are driving the audience and driving growth for the sport. So I actually think, that's I think the reality for the UK market. And I think in the US as well, there's probably only space for two leading promoters. And I think when you look at us on a global scale, we're the only people doing what we do with mega names back to back. You know, we had 10,000 people in Dallas a few weeks back now. You know, we're going to announce Jerome Buczenis' next fight very soon. We're the only people who are doing that.
If you were to learn of boxer or previously boxer contracted fighters were free of contract, how many would you be looking at?
I think if fighters are free of contract that are in people impress people, we'd look at everyone that made sense, of course. But we're not going to put ourselves in a position and do what others have done in the business, who, you know, and you know, go to fighters like let that play out. It's inevitable what will happen. But look, they got some brilliant fighters. You know, one fighter I've spoken about a lot over the years, Ben Whittaker, and I think he can be a superstar. I honestly think that. But I think I think he's been misguided really there, not through fault of his own, but I don't think he's been matched very well throughout his career. And I don't think he's been shouted about. I don't think he's had the momentum. At the end of the day, you need a voice who's constantly pushing you out there saying, this guy is, you know, the next coming of, you know, the next Ali. And I think he's missed that. He's missed someone pushing him every day. And there's been a lot of mistakes over the years that shouldn't have affected him, but have. Now, whether it was the round gate stuff with Liam Cameron, you know, there's been so many things, but let's see what happens. We're always in the market for great fighters wherever they're from.
Is that to say there's been no conversation with Ben Whittaker at all currently?
No, no
Okay,
conversation.
fair enough.
The answer probably wasn't, but no conversation. But look, he knows he's not just with that, he's a hot commodity. So when he's free and clear, he's in a great place, isn't he? Let's be honest. And you know, a lot of people talk about the reality is, you know, like this sky clause in fighters' contracts. Of course, you would have asked for that because you weren't signing to boxer for Ben Shalom. But let's be honest. Like you got to be frank and upfront about it. That's the reality of it. He had some power at that time. He had leverage. He had a big deal. He's messed it up. So if the fighters have the right to leave, they're gonna want to leave, aren't they?
Just to focus on a recent fighter that was with Matchroom that left, and that would be Terry Harper. Just on the sense of MVP have signed up a lot of female talent. Is that indicative of Matchroom moving away from female boxing, or is there still a want to promote female fighters?
No, look, we still have, you know, 4, 5, 6 fighters, female fighters under contract. Recently signed Tia-May Ayton, who fights again on September 6th. There's always going to be the interest and the intent and the push from us. I feel the work we've done over the last 10, 12, 14 years has been tremendous for female boxing. And I don't think because a new entrant comes into the market, it should be forgotten. Like, I don't think you should say, not saying you, but it should be forgotten all the work that was done, you know. But if someone else is going to come in and pay significant sums, which obviously they are doing, it's great for the fighters and brilliant to see. But that shouldn't then say, well, these people then aren't interested. I think it's all about the right opportunities at the right time with the right fights and the right fighters. And we'll continue to be, you know, continue to have an interest and invest in female boxing.
That's about the extent of my questions. I appreciate your time. Looking forward to seeing you on the circuit very soon. Thanks for taking us out.